Welcome back, boxing fans. So I was just listening to a Dante's boxing video, and of course, what he's trying to do is use Jim Lampley to push his consistent racial narratives. But unfortunately, what Jim Lampley said made no fucking sense at all. So he couldn't even totally agree with it. He just used it to manipulate the same old bullshit that he consistently pushes, which is pro-black, anti-everybody else. Lampley came out in his conversation that Dante was listening to and said that he's worried that Saudi Arabian money is going to dictate boxing, meaning that a lot of the big fights are going to happen in the EU, or like Saudi Arabia, Middle East, and because of the financial benefits, this is what's going to draw fighters to there, and because of that, what you're going to get is less competitive matchups, right? And then, of course, he pulled in Canelo Alvarez in criticizing Turki Al-Sheikh as well. Yet the irony with that whole statement is Canelo Alvarez and Turki Al-Sheikh aren't working together. Canelo Alvarez is literally working with an American promoter, Al Haymon from the PBC, right? So he's doing exactly what consistently has been done with American boxing. Al Haymon, who was part of Showtime, which were running mates with HBO, right? Those guys running boxing the same way for years and decades, they consistently did. Obviously, that model has died and burnt out, so we're moving on to newer and hopefully better things, right? But of course, the PBC still attached to that old system, so everything they do is based on pay-per-view. Dante came out so much and said, trying to, of course, deflect the responsibility to Canelo Alvarez, but I don't hear him criticizing Tank Davis, right? That's the irony in the situation. So Tank Davis can fight a bunch of nobodies, not even unify world titles, bring up guys in weight classes to fight on pay-per-view, charging $90 for those pay-per-views, but yet it's not the PBC that's doing it, it's Canelo Alvarez. Yet, if you look at who's promoting both Canelo Alvarez and Tank Davis, you'll notice it's the exact same person, Al Haymon and the PBC. So the fact that they're both being done the same way, taking on easy opponents for overcharged pay-per-views, that tells you everything you need to know. As far as Turki Al-Sheikh not making competitive fights, well, we know that that's complete bullshit. He's done just the opposite. He's literally put fighters in big fights where they got beat, and he didn't punish them for getting beat. He gave them multiple opportunities to make money and stay busy fighting high-level competition. We saw Wilder obviously get beat twice in a row. Once decision by Parker, once stopped by Zhang. Zhang has been busy, Parker's been busy. The whole heavyweight division, the cruiserweight division, everybody who's actually wanted to work with Turki Al-Sheikh and Saudi Arabia, all have gotten lots of fights, consistently been put on these events and paid well to put on competitive matchups. We just literally had Fury versus Usyk, which was a great heavyweight matchup. We just had Daniel Dubois versus AJ, which on paper was going to be a real 50-50 matchup. Dubois dominated and destroyed AJ, surprisingly. But, truthfully, you couldn't be that surprised. Then now you're going to have Beterbiev versus Bivol for undisputed at 175 pounds. Right? So, not competitive? Putting on cherry pick fights? No. Let's put this in context. The only people putting out cherry pick fucking fights is Al Haymon and the PBC. Right? Consistently we're getting pay-per-views that people aren't excited about. Whether you want to hate on Canelo or hate on Tank Davis, they're both being run the same way. Dante, who is full of shit, and you can't believe anything that comes out of his mouth, historically, he's got a long agenda. So anyone who's watched his channel knows that what I'm saying is completely factually true, right? This guy has consistently talked about, 2 pound-for-pound lists, the black fighters and the non-black fighters. And he talks about the black pound-for-pound list as the guys who don't get respect. And then he talks about the non-black fighters as guys that are hype jobs and no good. Literally, those are the labels that he has, telling you everything you need to know about his opinion and his perspective to the sport of boxing. But let's go deeper into this. The reality of the situation is, Al Haymon's had opportunities to sign with DAZN and aligning himself with Saudi Arabia and Saudi Arabia's money. Every promoter in boxing has done it. Even Al Haymon and the PBC have worked together to make fights. Saudi Arabia's big fight that happened in California, Bud Crawford's fight, there were plenty of PBC fighters on that card. So it's not as if the doors aren't open for him and his fighters to get in there to make competitive fights and get paid. The problem is Al Haymon doesn't want to put his fighters in with competitive matchups. He wants to put his fighters in with in-house opponents where he controls the majority of the money and those pay-per-view revenues. And he doesn't want to have to share it or deal with outside promotional companies. AI, example, Turki Al-Sheikh in Saudi Arabia, or any of the other promoters who obviously now are working with him, right? In the perfect skies of boxing, all of these promoters being on DAZN, having one platform where you could watch all the fights, would be the perfect scenario, right? Ring Magazine, now owned by Turki Al-Sheikh, people have long wanted a UFC model for boxing. Well, that's exactly what Turki Al-Sheikh is bringing. But within this, you don't have one promoter like the UFC. You still have multiple promoters, and they work together because they're benefiting their fighters financially, they're benefiting their promotional companies financially, they're benefiting boxing fans because now there's no wrong side of the street anymore. And actually, this is potentially a great thing for the sport of boxing, or so far it has been. Obviously, there's always possibilities and question marks that can be brought up, in the future. If you create a monopoly type of system, potentially boxers may be the ones who suffer down the road when they don't have other areas or other directions where they can go, where they can't play off of one another. But in saying that, the reality of the situation is, this is exactly what boxing fans want. The best fighting the best. Dante, of course, doesn't care about that because he wants this pro-Black American narrative. And he's afraid that if the Black American fighters now are mixed with everybody else under the promotional guise of Saudi Arabia and Turki Al-Sheikh, now a lot of his narratives are going to be exposed. Fights are going to be made. The whole racial narratives of certain fighters not getting fights or being ducked is going to be fucking shown to be nothing but bullshit, right? And all this racial propaganda that channels like him, Ego, the LDBC, and others have been pushing out for years just so they can make money off of clickbait videos on their channels, Fan in the perfect example, will be gone because they won't be able to push that bullshit anymore, because Tank Davis versus Shakur will be made. Shakur versus Lomachenko will be made. Haney versus Lopez will be made. Boots versus fucking Howard or Barrios or Stanionis will be made, right? All these fights will be made. Canelo versus Benavidez will be made, right? There will be no need, no reason to be critical. There will be no narrative to push because the fights actually that boxing fans want will get made. Pay-per-views are going to be $15 to $20. So there's not going to be a moaning, groaning about being overpaid for marginal pay-per-views against fighters that aren't superstars. But yet, this is not good enough for some people. Some people still have their agenda, which they've made money off of for over 10 years now, and they don't want to lose that. So the same as the PBC and Al Haymon, they hold tough to this whole old school mentality just because, heaven forbid, something positive happens in the sport of boxing and good change happens, which gives boxing fans exactly what they've been asking for decades now. But what would you expect from Dante's Boxing Nation? Lies, narratives, and racial bullshit. But leave it to him. Leave your comments below. Go check out the video yourself and give me your opinion. As far as Lampley, Lampley was a great storyteller, but as far as an individual and a human being, he's never been held up as great in either one of those respects.